On the 8th of March 1944, the Japanese 15th Army launched Operation Yugo, the code name for its long-awaited invasion of India. Striking across the River Chindwin in northern Burma, the initial aim of the offensive was to capture the key Indian towns of Imphal and Kohima and deliver a crushing blow against the British 14th Army, which at the time was stretched dangerously thin along the Indo-Burmese border. Tasked with securing the Kohima sector on the Japanese right flank was the 31st Division, which crossed the River Chindwin on the 15th of March, and against minimal British and Indian resistance, succeeded in reaching Kohima by early April. However, although the division made good progress, it was beginning to suffer from fatigue as a result of the mountainous terrain that dominates northeastern India, with a report on Operation Yugo detailing that the advance of the division was relatively smooth, but the transportation of supplies through the rugged mountain ranges was extremely difficult. Stocks of provisions dropped to low levels, and there was a shortage of forage for the pack animals. Almost all of the requisitioned oxen dropped dead during the passage of the mountains, and the loss of horses was about 16% for the artillery and about 60% for other units. The men also suffered from exhaustion and malnutrition. In spite of the challenges it faced, the 31st Division maintained its advance, and on the 5th of April it secured Kohima and encircled the remnants of the joint British-Indian garrison on a ridge just outside of the town. Whilst the bulk of the division focused on finishing off this garrison, the remainder of the 31st struck out to the west and surrounded a large part of the Indian 161 Brigade at Jotsoma. With this, the way was open for a Japanese advance on Dimapur. For the British 14th Army, the collapse of the Kohima front came as a complete surprise, mainly because its intelligence had greatly underestimated the size of the Japanese force operating in that sector. General William Slim, the commander of the 14th Army, later explained that, "I had calculated that, owing to difficulties to movement and maintenance in the mountains, the Japanese could not bring more than one regimental group against Kohima. In actual fact, they brought a complete full-strength division. We were not prepared for so heavy a thrust. Kohima, with its rather scratched garrison, and what was worse, Dimapur with no garrison at all, were in deadly peril. The loss of Kohima we could endure, but that of Dimapur, our only supply base and railhead, would have been crippling to an almost fatal degree. The vital need was now to bring in reinforcements, to ensure that Dimapur was held." Unfortunately for General Slim, all available troops in northeastern India had been committed to holding the Japanese offensive, and the only reserve immediately available to 14th Army was the British 2nd Division, which at the time was located in southern India, some 2,000 miles away. Commanded by Major General John Grover, the 2nd Division was carrying out amphibious warfare training across southern India when it received the news of the unfolding Japanese offensive. Closely monitoring the developments, General Grover became increasingly concerned with the rate of the enemy advance, so much so that in late March he personally asked the Allied High Command whether his division would be needed to reinforce 14th Army. To this, he was told that such a move would not be necessary, and instead the 2nd Division was to continue with its amphibious training and prepare for a move to the area of Chittagong in readiness for operations in western Burma. However, with the sudden collapse of the Kohima front in early April, these plans were quickly changed, and at the request of General William Slim, the division was ordered to abandon its training and redeploy to Dimapur to halt the enemy advance. The history of the 2nd Division details that, to meet the emergency, the division was rushed across India by road, rail and air. This move was made at a tremendous speed, and this speed was probably the saving factor in the events to follow. There was no time for a proper concentration at Dimapur, and as units of the division arrived, they went straight into action. In a remarkable feat, the 2nd Division executed its 2,000-mile redeployment in just a few days, and by the 11th of April 1944, divisional headquarters, 6 of its 9 infantry battalions, as well as a plethora of supporting arms, were on the ground and in position at Dimapur. On its arrival, the division was immediately ordered to advance up the Kohima road and relieve the encircled British and Indian troops at Jotsoma and Kohima. The latest Allied intelligence indicated that the situation facing both garrisons was becoming desperate, and thus it was imperative that the 2nd Division moved as fast as possible. Accordingly, on the 11th of April, the 7th Battalion, the Worcestershire Regiment, deployed out from Dimapur and made first contact with elements of the Japanese 31st Division at the village of Zubza. Here, a series of engagements unfolded, but the battalion was unable to make any progress. As a result, the 1st Battalion, the Queen's Own Cameroon Highlanders, was brought forward the next day, and with support from the divisional artillery, it succeeded in driving the enemy out of Zubzar. From here, the division continued its advance southwards, and it was on the 15th of April that its forward elements broke through and established contact with the Indian 161 Brigade at Jotsoma. At this juncture, the brigade came under the command of the 2nd Division, which was now poised to carry out the final push to relieve the garrison surrounded on Kohima Ridge. However, before undertaking such an operation, Major General John Grover ordered a temporary halt in his division's advance, so as to enable supply and reinforcements to be moved up to the front line. In addition, the general also wanted to ensure the safety of his line of communications, which stretched back for over 40 miles to Dimapur, and which he feared were at risk of enemy infiltration. To cover off against this threat, the general employed 3 of his infantry battalions to patrol the sector from Dimapur to Jotsoma. At the same time, he deployed his remaining 6 infantry battalions forward, and together with 161 Brigade, they were to carry out the relief of the Kohima garrison. In support would be the full weight of the divisional artillery, which had been moved up to the Zubzar area and was now in range to target Kohima. Following this reorganisation, the 2nd Division resumed offensive operations on the 18th of April 1944. At 0700 that morning, the entire divisional artillery laid down an intense bombardment against enemy positions in and around Kohima. Simultaneously, the 161 Brigade moved out from its positions at Jotsoma and advanced down the main road to Kohima. Over the next few hours, the brigade fought hard against the determined enemy, until finally it managed to break through to the Kohima Ridge and make contact with the beleaguered British and Indian troops on top. The first unit to establish this link-up was the 1st Battalion of the 1st Punjab Regiment, which climbed to the top of the ridge under the cover of artillery fire and took up a defensive position overlooking the Japanese forces below. For the remainder of the 18th and going into the 19th of April, this battalion fought valiantly to hold the ridge against repeated enemy attacks, which brought enough time for 2nd Division to move up trucks and ambulances to the base of the ridge to begin evacuating the remnants of the Kohima garrison. Whilst this evacuation was underway, the remainder of the 161 Brigade, together with the 2nd Battalion, the Durham Light Infantry, launched a series of attacks on the 19th of April to secure the flanks of the road that led up to the ridge. The history of the Durham Light Infantry details that on the afternoon of the 19th, B Company of the 2nd Battalion was ordered to attack a feature called Terrace Hill, which commanded the road into Kohima and which it was vital to secure for the safe passage of the evacuation transport columns. The attack went like clockwork and the company wrought havoc with the bayonet. Over 50 casualties were inflicted on the Japanese and a quantity of equipment was captured. With the route up to Kohima Ridge secured, the 2nd Division poured additional troops into the area, and it was at 0600 on the 20th of April that the 1st Battalion of the 1st Punjab Regiment was reinforced by the arrival of the 1st Battalion, the Royal Berkshire Regiment, which took over a section of the defences on the ridge. That same morning, the final part of the Kohima garrison was extracted out from the area, thus bringing an end to a siege that had lasted 15 days. For the 2nd Division, the effort to relieve the encircled troops at Jotsoma and Kohima was one of the most extraordinary operations it had ever mounted. In just a couple of weeks, the division carried out a 2,000-mile redeployment, advanced 45 miles through unfamiliar mountainous terrain, and against a spirited Japanese enemy, it broke through to relieve the encircled garrisons. Moreover, the division successfully drove the enemy away from the key Allied supply base at Dimapur, which not only secured the logistical network of 14th Army, but also deprived the Japanese 15th Army of essential supplies that were needed for an advance into central India. Reflecting on the battle, the history of the 2nd Division concludes that the cost to the division of this fight can be seen in the military cemetery at Kohima. There on the hill slopes is one of the most beautiful cemeteries in the world. On the ridges of Kohima, the divisional and unit war memorials bear witness to the deeds of the soldiers of the 2nd Division. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe so that you never miss one of my future videos.